What up? This is Caroline with the CWC podcast, where we believe that life without your favorite foods is not worth living. I'm going to be talking a lot about my journey to food freedom, and of course, I will always keep it real by sharing the good, the bad, and of course, the ugly.
Welcome back to the CWC podcast. Today, I have a really exciting guest for you guys. She goes by the name of the Twitchy Witch on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. She does tarot card readings, and I actually just had a reading with her last week, and it was so cool. Everything she said was like really eerily spot on. And like I had never met her. One of my friends told me about her on TikTok. So I found her, researched her, watched some of her videos, just kind of instantly really liked her vibe. And I was like, I want to do a reading with her. So I booked one. She was actually booked like a month out. So I had to wait. My reading ended up being last week. So she like didn't even know who I was. I just went on her website and like booked a thing. And I was like, you are just so cool. I love your vibe. This reading was amazing. I want to have you on my podcast. So without further ado, here we go. I'm going to get her. She's been sitting here waiting. So how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Your voice is so soothing, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It's the mic.
It sounds like one of those ASMR videos where people are like, have you seen, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. People have asked me to do ASMR.
That does not surprise me.
I don't know. Like I'm not someone who enjoys ASMR, which surprises me every time someone's like, "Oh, your voice is like ASMR." I'm like, "Really?"
It is though. It's like, you know how people say like you have a voice for radio. You really do have like an ASMR voice.
I guess I should look into it then. I mean, overpass my aversion.
It would literally be just like what you're doing now. You would just be like, so, and like tapping on the mic.
So remember that time that Jesus went into the temple.
Yes.
Jesus.
I love it. Exactly. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. I'm so excited to have you on and just kind of like pick your brain about all the stuff that you do, because I find it so interesting. And I feel like you have such a plethora of things that you talk about on your TikTok, your Instagram. And I just kind of want to give you the floor to go into kind of why you chose to go into like the tarot reading for specifics or any of that stuff. Like what was like the first thing that interested you? And I know that your parents played a role in that. So I want you to just tell your story.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, like you said, I was kind of on this path before I knew I was on the path. Both of my parents are spiritual in their own way. They're not very religious, but my mother reads dreams. She interprets dreams since I was really young. It's just like a given. Somebody in the town has a dream. They ask my mother. I have a dream. I tell my mother. Like that's just what it is. And my dad was like very occultist in his own way and spiritual. So he had a lot of friends who were spiritual religious leaders. So from sheikhs and rabbis to monks and priests, Orthodox priests, Catholic priests, but they were all really good mentors. You know, they were all very spiritual. They never taught me anything in a dogmatic way. They always answered my questions with more questions, and I always had a lot of questions. So, I mean,
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. They taught me that that's really the only way to teach. You know, you don't teach anyone anything. You just make them think. You just make people ask questions. The question is what's important, essentially, at the bottom of it, rather than the answer, because there is no answer. And I think that's what got me into tarot, because with tarot, I know a lot of people read in a way that suggests that cards have specific meanings. This symbol means this card means this. But like you'll remember from our reading, I don't take meanings into consideration. I do the opposite. If anything, the card doesn't give us an answer, but it makes us ask questions. Why are we doing this, not that? And why don't we try this? And what about this little bird on your shoulder? What about this little sword coming out of your back? Oh, well, what's happening here? So it all just kind of ties together. And then of course dreams are the same, made of the same stuff. So yeah.
Interesting. I agree with that. And that's why one of the things I really enjoyed about our reading and just about you in general is you can tell that you are here to put forth information and to help people, but you don't do it in a way that is like, this is the way to do this, or this means this, even with the cards. And I thought that was so cool during our reading because, I've had readings before and it would be like, well, this means this because of this. And to me, what that does is it limits what that could be or what it could even mean for me or anyone else who is doing a reading. And so I don't know. I just thought that was so interesting when you were like, okay, here's where the cards fell. This is what this one represents. Does that mean anything to you? And I feel like we are then able to step outside of like our own like limiting thoughts, belief systems, whatever you want to call it, and do what's best for us. And ultimately, I know that's like getting kind of grand in the speaking right out of the gate, but that is how I coach women to just achieve food freedom is I'm like, get out of the box. Stop thinking about like, it has to be done this way because this person said so, because this is the result you want. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. You got to get out of the box and think, how can I make this work? And what would this mean for me to do it this way or to not think about doing it a certain way? So I love that.
Yeah, 100%. It's the openness of it. It's the acknowledgement of the endlessness of the moment and the journey that the moment carries. And the card represents that, right? Like you don't tell the women you're coaching, you got to do 1, 2, and 3. You'll say, this is what you might encounter. This is what you want to ask yourself. This is how you might want to handle it. But at the end of the day, you're going to develop your own style. You're going to have your own journey. Like, I can't tell you what to think. I think Socrates said that as well. I can't teach you anything, but I can teach you how to think. And that's about it. Like, I can't tell you what to think, but I can teach you how to think.
Right. And in the terms of what I do, ironically, I'm teaching them how to unthink. I'm like, let's unravel what you've been told to think and believe because it's false. It's, and now it's limiting you in your life. And it sounds so simple when I talk about it, but it really, really is. And at the heart of everything, I always say like, what I feel like I got from you when I got my reading from you is just, I got like an openness of this person isn't coming at me with a certain set of beliefs, which is what initially drew me to you is you aren't like one side or the other. You're just like, this is kind of how I believe. These are the things I study. These are the things I'm interested in. This is how they can, come into your life and play a role. And then now here you go. Like, here's your reading and you do with it what you please. And I ironically found more links of like what was going on in my life through that reading. It was so weird. I mean, the stuff that you brought up, I was like, that is really scary how on point the cards were. It was like an exact depiction of everything that I've kind of been going through, like with business and personal stuff. But at the end of it, I feel like you just have to be open to allowing people to have their experience, which is really hard for some people. But you have to just let them have their experience and guide them along the way. And I think people are scared to do that. And people are also scared to allow people to just have their experience for whatever reason. So you're really good at doing that.
Well, it's programming too, right? Like a lot of spiritual people today, people who are spiritual mentors, spiritual leaders, a lot of them, especially in the West, grew up in Christian societies, Christian families, Christian communities, which ultimately has an underlying dogmatic approach to it. So I notice a lot of spiritual people who approach their teaching and their spirituality in a way that they think is independent of their Christianity or their Christian upbringing, but is still performing in the same exoteric priestly style. There's still a dogma. Oh, you thought that this was like this? No, let me tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I've learned anything in the last 20, 25 years of my journey, because my brain spirit, psycho spirit broke very, very early, like when I was very young. And if I learned anything on the journey, it's that there is no truth. There's no capital T truth. There are personal truths that are useful to you. You create whatever the truth is. And at the end of the day, beyond all of that, there will always be a universal cosmic song playing, and you're going to be a part of it. You are a part of it. Like when you see synchronicities, for example, on your microwave and on your phone, and we always wonder, like, oh, this means that I'm on the right path. Or this is a sign from the universe. Well, in a way, yes, it's a sign that you're on the right path, but not because the universe is telling you that you're on the right path, but because you can't be on any other path but the right path. Like you're Hickey, you're just a little like you're one note in the song. You think like the
Right.
song is going to make a mistake with you? Of course not. You're perfect. You're where you're supposed to be. Everything is where it's supposed to be. And I think understanding that, or having that understanding, I guess, in the way that I've lived my life for a long time, helps me leave a lot of space for people to just do themselves. Like,
Right.
that's just, there's no role for me to tell you what to do with your life. The only role I can have is to say, hey, this is some perspective. Since you asked for it, here is what I think could be. What do you think of that? And then that conversation both enriches me and enriches you. Like the reader and the person being read benefits from having this conversation, having this exchange, using this space to project and play and talk, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think doing it without that sense of, I don't want to say authority, but like you said, just talking and allowing the person that you're having a conversation with to have their experience and not trying to kind of edge it in any way on your own behalf is a really powerful thing. And I don't think that I think that's rare. I think it is very rare to have people coach or provide a service or provide anything to someone and not come in with their own, I don't want to say agenda because that's like a negative word, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
most
people do
coaches
it in good
here,
intention.
yes. And that's, yeah, not saying they're not trying to help someone, but most coaches, even coaches that I've hired in the past, were like, this is how you do this. This is how you're going to get the best result. You will do these things. And I did them and I got a result out of it. But didn't ever, I didn't ever feel like I was doing it my way. And I may have gotten what I paid for, or I got out of that program what my coach promised me if I did it. But I still was like pretty lost, like like kind of in my soul. I was like, I don't feel like I'm fulfilled. I'm not eating the foods I really want to eat. Yes, I'm doing XYZ. But what about like when I'm done? Then what do I do? And so
Right.
that was a big reason why I wanted to start my business, is because I wanted to coach very differently from other coaches, but also be successful at it. I was like, I got to figure out how to do this to where I want to give my clients the 100% freedom to do kind of what they want, but teach them ways to incorporate it. Like, here's how you'll do this into your life and like it and have fun and not feel miserable, but you can still make progress. It's not like you have to forego the results. And I, I don't know. I just think that that's really the way that most people should, not talking about me or you, but I think everybody needs to just coach and lead with openness and letting people have their own experience. So I love that. That's one thing I really love about you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. The people do it in good intentions because this is what they know to do. And like I said, it's programming. And the West, and Jung talks about this, lots of philosophers talk about this, the way that even the Western person, the Western individual, the way that they approach their spirituality and their religion, let's say in terms of Christianity, it's in a way that externalizes the Christ and externalizes the Godhead so that it becomes something to be worshipped and revered and looked up to and aspired for, etc. And that creates the one way, the one path. This is the way. And we can see that in not just in the spiritual community, in, our fitness regimens, in the way that Western psychology categorizes people, the neurodivergent and the neurotypical, for example. When if we were to take a step back from all of these binaries, this very Manichaean white, black, good, bad, the right way and the wrong way, we would take a step back and really see, there's no such thing as a neurotypical. Everyone is divergent neurally from the other. Everyone is their own neurally divergent individual. And in terms of like coaching and spiritual practice, we always, in the same way that we externalize religion, we externalize the process. Okay, this is the process. Since you're like, a hot dog, or you're a piece of meat and we want to turn you into a hot dog, we do step 1, 2, 3, you become hot dog. Very easy, very nice. But the fact is that, you're not trying to be a hot dog, and you're not a piece of meat. You're a formless form, and you want to find your way. And to be able to find your way, you need to start from like the very core, the sense of who you are and what you want. So like when I'm in a reading with someone, I'm not going to judge them, be like, oh, you can't think like this, or you can't think like that, or you can't do this, or you have to do this, or those are your intentions, or those are not your intentions. The power is one and undivided. It's yours. You're going to do whatever you want with it. I'm just here to help you tap into it, just to grab your gear so that you can adjust the gears and go whichever way you want to go, as opposed to be like, oh, you have a car? This is the road you want to take. Take whatever road you want, but let me just help you drive the car first. Like, just get your hand on the gear. Yanni.
That is so interesting. And I mean, even I sometimes I like to consider myself open-minded, and then I get reminded that I'm really not open-minded. And like, even with what you just said, I found myself being like, thinking about even things that I think about the way things are right now with like, even our political climate, like it's hard not to. And I have a really hard time not getting, I don't know if it's like, I don't know. It's really hard for me to differentiate and really kind of have like an open view of it. And so, but I do agree with you that really is the only way that you'll ever really be able to reach people. And my husband always says that. He's like, I love how passionate you are. And I love how you like know what you believe in, you know what you want, but sometimes you can get like on the other side of it and get way too passionate about it, which it's in order to really like reach more people, or I don't want to say change, impact, I guess would be the right word, is you have to have that outlook that you were just describing. So thank you for saying that, because that was like a like a little lesson moment. I was like thinking of things like during that whole thing that you were just saying.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yeah. So what was the first time that you thought, I want to start getting into doing the readings? Like what made you want to, and how old were you? Like when did all that begin?
So like I said, like reading dreams is the oldest thing that I've been with. And that in it, following that, also just reading the signs of life. I grew up in a way with my parents and with these mentors where like, if we're sitting down talking about something and a picture falls and breaks, someone will make the joke, the spirits like it, and no,
Yeah.
and no, this is a sign, like, and no, this is the movement of the song. We're in it. We're playing it. We're hearing it. We're not just playing a part in it. We're really aware of it. So that was always part of my life. And then when I was in my undergrad, I started an English lit degree, and we were reading a poem by T.S. Eliot and The Wasteland, which is so relevant today for us as a poem in terms of like this, all the Armageddon vibes that we're getting. Very good poem. But at some point in the poem, Eliot says that he visited a sorceress named Madame Sosostris, and she had a wicked pack of cards. And she pulled a card, and on the card was a Phoenician sailor. And she said, "This is your card, the Hanged Man, the Fisher King, etc." And when I saw wicked pack of cards, Madame Sosostris, and then Phoenician sailor, because my parents are Lebanese and they've always had this affinity with ancient Phoenicians, and they invented the alphabet and all of this. I saw that in Eliot's poem, and I was like, oh, I need to find these cards. I need to find out what these cards are. And I went and got myself a pack of cards, and I just kept reading ever since. And I started to see everything, the dreams, the literature, the myths. Like I had already at that point read through the Quran and the Bible and just a lot of mythology. And I've always been an avid reader too, and an avid like consumer of media, movies, music, theater, plays, etc. So I saw the cards and I just immediately was like, okay, well, I found you. Like these are my dreams manifest basically on these cards. Perfect.
Oh, cool. That is so neat. So tell me like what was one of your dreams that maybe either you interpreted or maybe your mom interpreted that was like a really cool story or something that you were like, that you found very, very like moving or impactful to your life?
Do you want like an earlier spiritual dream or like a more recent prophetic dream?
I want a more recent prophetic dream.
Okay. I think you'll like this because this one actually has to do with America.
I'm ready.
So in 2020, right before COVID, 2019 to 2020, I lived in San Diego for a little bit. And then when COVID happened, I left. And then in 2021, I had planned to go back to write a story about my time there and just go back to the place and see all the different streets and stuff. So 3 months before going, I booked my ticket. And the night that I booked the ticket, I had a very, very interesting dream. And in the dream, I was called to a building in the US, a very, very tall building. And I went up this very long elevator, tall elevator, to the second last floor. And when I get there, I realized that me and a few other women have been called here to accept an award. But it's just this big empty room. And the far wall is just this big glass window wall opening. And on the other side, there's this big presidential desk, and Trump is sitting behind it. So when I get into the room, I start to feel a little weird. I realize, okay, we're going to get an award. Me and these women, one of the women have like a hairdresser or something with her, something that looks like a bodyguard. And I'm looking at Trump and I'm a little bit uneasy. So I try to leave and I get out of the room, but it just takes me into this corridor where all there are these little rooms with no windows in them, just these little white empty rooms, lights on, totally empty with like a little stone bench in them, steel benches in them, just room after room after room after room. And I went through all of them and I came back out and I was back in the big room. And so Trump looks at me and he's like, "Oh, where did you go?" I was like, "I was just looking for the bathroom." And he was like a little bit flirty with me at first. So I thought, okay, maybe I can like play this smart and get out of here because I'm freaked out. So I try and like pretend that I have like a little bit of an accent or something, like maybe I can turn him on or something, get him to feel bad. I'm like, "Oh, I'm not very comfortable. Do you think I can go?" And as soon as I say that, his whole face just transforms. Like he was like a little bit flirty and smiley. He was really nice at first. And then as soon as I said that, he suddenly became very aggressive. and he called the other bodyguard guy to grab my arm, and he grabbed my other arm, and they started trying to push me out the window. They led me over to the window and they wanted to push me out. And there was what there was outside the window was like an enclosing. So there were other buildings around us. And in the buildings, there were people watching, and there was scaffolding all over the buildings. So he's trying to push me out. And he's like, you have to jump. You have to jump down there. And I was like, I don't want to jump. Like, can't I just climb down? Can't I just climb down the scaffolding? And he was like, no, nobody is going to think that you're crazy if you just climb down the scaffolding. And then I realized that I was brought here to put on a show for them to prove that me and these other women were crazy. And I just became so overwhelmed, like I was going to cry, and I woke up from the dream. Okay. So, yeah.
That is crazy.
What's crazier is what happened. Okay. Well, this was the night that I booked the ticket to San Diego, right? So I told my mom about the dream, and she was like, be careful, because something is going to happen in America that you don't like. Be careful. And I was like, okay. I didn't know what was going to happen. But then 3 months later, I fly to San Diego. Before I get to San Diego, I fly from Qatar to San Francisco, and it's a very long 18-hour flight straight from Qatar to San Francisco. And San Francisco is my second last stop. So it was the long elevator from the bottom to the second last floor of the building. I get to the second last floor, or the second last stop, San Francisco, and the people at customs are being somewhat polite, but they're kind of bullying me. It's weird. Like the guy at the customs desk, he's this young Hispanic dude, and he's, kind of flirty with me, but also like kind of bullying me, like insinuating that I was in Yemen. Where did you come from? How long were you in Beirut? When were you last in Yemen? You said you were in Beirut, but it says here that you just came from Qatar. Like they were just trying to get me to say something, to say that like I'm a terrorist, essentially, because I'm from Lebanon. And I was just like weirded out, like, no, why do you keep bringing up Yemen? Like, there's nothing on my passport that says Yemen. I've never been to Yemen. And that's when he started to get aggressive. He was like, it's just a question, ma'am. It's just a question. I'm going to need you to follow the officer into the immigration's office. And that was when Trump changed his attitude with me. So I go in there, and they start moving me from room to room. And they are these tiny little white light rooms with steel benches, no windows. And they start searching me. They search my clothes. They search my suitcases, my jacket. I use an olive oil soap that my grandmother makes for my hair and my skin. So I take it with me wherever I go, right? They literally took apart the soap, all of it. I had like 5 or 6 bars of soap. They just broke them open, ripped them apart. And they would take me from room to room to room to search me over and over, and to ask me questions over and over. And I realized, oh, these are the little rooms that I passed by. And I kept on asking them, can I use the bathroom? Can I go have a cigarette? Can I take a fucking break? And they just kept on saying, no, you can't go anywhere, until they basically told me, you're not going to be allowed into the US, and you're going to have to decide if you want to go to Lebanon or Canada. And I tell them that I would like to speak to my community. I'd like to speak to my family before I decide. And then they start getting really aggressive and telling me that I have no right to speak to anyone. And I was like, no, I do, and I will. And if you don't give me my phone, I'd like to speak to your superior. Like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not making this decision in the midst of a global pandemic without my community. I don't know what you guys are doing out here, but I'm not doing it. Like, no. And then at this point, we kept on going back and forth, and there was so much. I'm just gonna skip over all the little details until eventually they give me my phone after like hours worth of arguing. I call my partner at the time, and I'm like, babe, صار معي واحد اتنين تلاتة, like in Arabic, just naturally, not. As soon as I started speaking, I got instantly body slammed, handcuffed. The woman was on her walkie-talkie. We have a code, whatever. The guy, and he's like, take her to wing G. They handcuff me, and I start crying because what the fuck is happening? And she starts yelling at me do you need your medication, ma'am? What medication are you on? Do you have your medication, or will we need to provide you with medication? And then I was like, oh, they want it to look like I'm absolutely fucking nuts because I just want to speak to my community and I want to do it in Arabic. This is fucking insane. Like, is this how people live out here? And I just start going off. Like, I told her, I was like, if this is how people are treated out here, it's really no surprise that half the population is on medication and the other half is suicidal. Like, I'm really not surprised if this is how people are treated. Like, this is insane. They put me in solitary confinement for like 40 hours. No joke. It was quite an experience.
Oh
And
my God.
I know. And I eventually went back to Lebanon, but you can see how so much of the dream and was aligned. Like even the women, because when I eventually got out of the solitary confinement and they put me with the rest of the deportees, is literally just a handful of women, just a handful of like brown, Eastern, Romanian women and myself. Like that was it.
I like don't even have words. Number one, that is so crazy that you had that dream
Mhm.
that, I mean, essentially mirrored that experience that you would end up having 3 months later. That's crazy. Number
Yeah.
two, I am just like what you said about if this is how people are treated here, it's no wonder that half of them are medicated and half of them are suicidal because, you know, that is something that I have been struggling with recently. I would say since COVID started in 2020, obviously, because, growing up, I, I don't want to say there weren't any problems, but like my childhood, there wasn't anything big until 9/11. And
Mm.
I remember like where I was when that happened. I remember the phone call I made. I remember like where I was sitting, how I felt. And it was a very surreal, like almost like I was like, this isn't happening. Like they're like playing this like a movie. It's for a movie or something. Like my brain could not register the largeness of that situation because it was so crazy and I had never witnessed anything like that. And I feel like from that moment forward, it has been one thing after another. And, as a young child, I remember having not, maybe not dreams, but always kind of, I wonder if something bad will happen. I wonder if we'll ever be in a position where we don't have food at the grocery store. Like I was thinking stuff like this as a child. And I don't think most kids think about stuff like that. I just always kept thinking like, well, anything could happen, right? And I do have OCD, which tends to make me kind of go to that worry place of what's the worst? What's the worst? But so it was really hard for me to differentiate. Is this just me overreacting or overthinking? That would never happen. And, for instance, I've been scared of tornadoes my whole life. And my mom always, the only way she ever calmed me down was saying, there's never been one ever that has touched down where we live. So that was always kind of my fallback to be like, okay, that's a fact. That's data that my mom is providing me. It makes me feel so much better. Why, I won't worry. And
Mm.
now with like everything the way it is, especially here in the US, I'm like, oh my God, this is like a lot of things that I feared as a child. I feel like I'm watching them play out and I don't, it's almost like an out of body experience a lot of the times. So I tend to disassociate. I just, because there's, what do you do? Like, what do you do about it? But then it makes it really hard because I'm like, I feel like I knew on some
Mhm.
level, I feel like I knew that something would happen in my lifetime that I would have to watch happen. And that's scary. And
Mm.
I don't know. And now we're just kind of left with like, things aren't great here. And
Yeah.
I
I think
cycle
as a
through wanting to
mm,
leave, but I'm like, I don't even know how you would do that.
mhm. It sounds, at least to me, it sounds like you had an intuitive sense as a child that the security that you're constantly fed and told exists is a facade and it's going to fall. It's not going to last. And it is falling. And I totally agree that 9/11 was the beginning, the tipping point. This is when the facade started to break. You can't hold a mask together for so long. No order lasts forever. All order tends to chaos. And the American dream, it died pretty early. We expected it to last longer. When I'm reading reading the history of America and the American dream, I'm like, damn, that was quick. Like, you got nothing on Egypt, that's for sure.
Right. And I believe a lot of it is because, the way our systems are set up here is, there's a reason they're set up to keep it running the way that it's been running. And I feel like for so long we were fed, specifically my parents' generation, like they were fed the story, and they were like, okay, that's what we'll do. We'll go to work. We want to climb the corporate ladder and succeed. But they also, I feel like, were given, I don't want to say a realistic opportunity, but I feel like it was more, okay, if I do this, this, and this, I will get this. And my dad he said all the time, just go to college. That's all that matters, is a college degree. You only need to worry about going to college. That is the most important thing. And now all people my age are like, what a fucking joke. Like, going to college, that's a joke. So I can be hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And nowadays that does not guarantee you a job that you're going to make a certain amount of money and then get promoted and make, you know what I mean? Everything is so crazy right now with our economy and everything that everyone now knows, like, nothing is guaranteed. So it makes it very chaotic and volatile, and honestly really hard to kind of keep your feet on the ground. I know, I mean, I'm just really speaking for myself. I know a lot of people right now are just like, kind of like, what the fuck?
Well, remember too that Americans, North Americans, but Americans especially, everyone in the New World is essentially segregated, intentionally segregated by their governments from history, from the rest of the world. So when our parents or our grandparents' generation was just starting within, the workers' economy, the boomers' generation, the American dream, the beginning of capitalism and true consumerism and true industry, this was just the beginning of it. But Americans are not taught history in school, are not taught that the natural way of all order, all empire, is to rise and fall. This is just nature. It's as basic as the Tower of Babel. All the people came together and they all spoke one language and they built the tower, and eventually it fell down. That's the tower card of the tarot. The message being that any structure built with hands is doomed to fall. It just is. It's not a good or bad thing. And I don't think it's a bad thing what America is going through. I think ultimately it's a transition. The whole world is going through a transition. America is just catching up because it was holding itself together on the failure of other countries like my own. But now, khalas, it's running dry. The whole world has run dry. We have to change. We have to transition. And I think what this is doing is creating a lot of opportunity for people like you and so many others to take a step back and say, oh, okay, so, all that we are going to live forever and death doesn't exist for the empire of America, that was bullshit. I mean, it's a basic lesson to learn for someone like me, but no, at the end of the day, we all have our programming. We all have our upbringing, and the school system, the government, the jobs, the corporations, everything, even the way that the psychological paradigm is set up, and big pharma, everything in the New World is set up to make you numb to the anxiety of non-existence and divorced from the rest of the world. You don't need anything if you're in America because you have the whole world. You don't need to leave. You don't need to read about history because you are history. You don't need to read about other cultures because you are culture. And it's not the people's fault that it's this way. And if anything, I think what's happening, even though it's painful now, it's going to be very beneficial in the long run.
I have to hold on to hope. I mean, honestly, like, I kind of half joke about that, but you can kind of start to veer down like a dark path with it, or you can be like, okay, so I feel like I'm not the only one that's kind of, I mean, I've seen it for a while, but I feel like a lot of people who maybe hadn't seen it are now like, whoa, we all are seeing, like, I feel like the veil, so to speak, is being
It's
lifted.
being
And
lifted.
yeah, and something has to change at some point, I do believe. And I mean, the gap, our economic wealth gap is like the largest it's ever been. And when that we're kind of sitting right here, I feel like we're at a precipice. Like, okay, now what? Like, I mean, what do we
Mhm.
do? Because there's people who, I just feel like the people who have, we have such a small percentage of people who own the wealth in this country, and they're so completely out of touch with the rest of the country who they kind of rely on for shit to run. And these people are over here like having nothing. And it's like, I feel like what's happening is they're, we're all being pushed into a corner. And it's like, you can only push so far until like the animal starts to be like, okay, I can't, where else am I going to go? You're going to push me back far enough. And then what?
You know, the thing is that it doesn't begin and end with America, and American wealth isn't American in essence, like um, the money of the world, the military industrial complex, the great capitalist machine. It doesn't care about America or Canada or Lebanon or China. It's a machine. It runs together all over the world. It has intersecting networks all over the world. So America's wealth isn't in America. It's in Saudi Arabia. It's in Israel. It's in Iran. It's in China. It's in Switzerland. It's in Norway, in the Ukraine, in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
It's everywhere. Yani, the American people themselves, maybe today, and this is what I mean, what I think is good about what's happening, is that the American people are waking up to this fact of a facade falling, but it doesn't begin and end in America. We're all going through it. The gap is wide wherever you go, and the leaders, the top dogs, they're not in America. They're in Dubai. They're on their yachts. They're on an island with Jeffrey Epstein. Like they're not in America, and they're not out to get America, and they don't care about Americans. They don't care about people. It's not about the people. It's a machine that will do whatever it needs to do and go wherever it needs to go to sustain itself, which is why we can bet on, I guess, everything not going to shit. Because, like I said a minute ago, I think the greatest limitation for Americans is the divorce from the rest of reality and history. Because history shows us many, many, many an empire that has risen and fallen, and situations that have been much more disastrous and much worse, people who have been much poorer. We think the gap is so wide, but it's not wider than when we had kings and queens and the entire population of people was just a series of peasantry. It's not like the gap is wider than that, for example. It's not wider than it is in the Middle East between the Saudi kings and their people, or between the Yemenis and the Kuwaitis, or whoever. And but because we have this tendency to exaggerate, because in the new world we live inside of a bubble and we think that everything begins and ends where we are, we think, oh my gosh, this is the craziest thing to ever happen, and oh my gosh, are we going to live through it? Bro, we've lived through so much worse. This is nothing. We're still so privileged right now. Like, if our
True.
ancestors could see what we were going through, they'd be like, please chill the fuck up. Just chill and sit on your phone. Like, at least you have a little phone. All we were doing was praying under the stars. Seriously, just chill. Just be on the internet. Don't think too much. I don't know.
Be on the
Whatever.
internet.
Literally.
That's so true, and honestly humbling even to hear, because and I feel like that is a big problem. I want to say what you just said. You said it twice about um in America. I feel like we're kind of divorced from what's going on everywhere else. And we are
Yes.
like in this little bubble, American bubble, and this is the way things are. This is the way things will be. These, kind of keeping us away from knowing what's actually going on with any other country. And that's
or history.
crippling. Yeah, or history, yes. And
even more importantly, and I think the great flaw or the great fault of the settler colony, which is America and Canada. The New World is a settler colony. And the great flaw and fault of the settler colony is the fact that it literally uproots people. You know, it's very difficult to trace back which European ancestors you came from without doing a little heritage test and getting, maybe a sense of what percentage of little pieces of Europe your ancestors came from at best. But to be able to live your history the way مثلا we do here in the Middle East, people are still so ancient and everything is still so ancient because there was never a time when somebody tried to, or well, people tried, but there was never a time when the entirety of our world was erased, stomped on, buried, and built on top of. And that's what happened, right, in the US. And when that happens, people create new narratives. They block out their history. They forget their history. They lose their roots. And people become like they are today, where they're just kind of floating around, not really sure what to do or where they're going or if they're going the right way or the wrong way, or, externalizing God and externalizing the power. And, oh, it's the government, and, oh, it's them, and they don't care about us, and we need to do this. And bro, let's just take it as like, a couple thousand years ago, your ancestor was probably some peasant under King Louis shouting for some bread, being told to shut the fuck up and go sit in the stables. So, we need to have that perspective. I think it's Cicero said that whoever doesn't have a sense of 3,000 years of history remains forever an infant in the eyes of the world. And that's a lot of people, especially in the New World, especially.
Yeah, man, that is like, I just feel like I'm learning so much, even from you. Like right now, I know most of it as like a whole, but it makes you, when I hear you saying it, even me, like I sit back and I'm like, I don't know a lot about my history, or I mean, we aren't taught. A lot of it is,
I think that's intentional.
Stamped. Yes, it is. For what you said, for like the system to run the way that it's running, it was intentional and it was not talked about. And now it's not being taught in history books to children in schools. So they're not going to learn about things that actually happen because we aren't supposed to know about that. We're all supposed to think everything's keep wearing our rose-colored glasses and keep working. So,
yeah,
which
or,
I mean,
or freak out and stay in America, right? And work in America.
Or
like
yes.
Most Americans don't know that if you were to come to a Middle East country with your passport, you would be paid so well on a tax-free salary to do literally anything just because you have an American passport. Like my professors from my college here were all American because they just ran from taxes and were offered better salaries here because they have US passports. And so many Americans don't know how many opportunities they have outside, like just in the rest of the world. So many countries are more than happy to employ Americans and give them better salaries for their Americanship. So the privilege of the passport, that's not talked about. That's not understood at all. It's a massive privilege.
That is so interesting that you brought that up because that's been a point of content for me and my husband. I've been talking for the past year and a half about wanting to, like, something crazy will come out in the news and I'm like, we got to get out of here. Like, we got to flee the country. I don't know where we're going to go, but like, we got to go somewhere else. Like anywhere at this point feels like it has to be better than where we're at. And he will be like, yeah, but what about the taxes? I hear it's higher. And I'm like, I don't know everything because I'm not going to pretend like I know what everything's like in other countries that I've never visited. But I do know people and I talk to people on TikTok who live in Canada or Europe or wherever. And they'll tell me how it is. Like, I have a friend who lives in Norway and she was like, I don't understand when I go. So she came to New York and she paid for something at like a convenience store. And she was like, you guys get taxed everything that you buy? Like, And I said, yeah,
Mhm.
don't you? And she was like, no. She was like, there are no taxes. It comes out of my pay based on what I make. And I was like, huh, that
Mm.
sounds pretty logical, actually. And she said, yeah, like it's literally a percentage of, if you make 100,000, you get taxed this much. If you make this much, you get taxed this much. And it all goes to one kind of pool or fund. And then we all, like, she's like, if I have to go to the doctor, I just
Healthcare,
go.
education,
Yeah.
roads, transportation, pension, old age, all of that. That's where your taxes go in Canada and Norway. And those are places that I would say are high taxed, have high taxes. In Dubai, there's no income or sales tax. So you make $100,000, it's $100,000 in your pocket. Done. Like you're not being
Wow.
Kuwait, Qatar, all of the Arab countries. I think one of them is putting up a 3% salary tax, but that's it. Like 3%. That's absolutely nothing. In Canada, you make
No.
$100,000, you've got 40,000. 40% of that is going to taxes. So taxes are really high in Canada. I'm not a fan, but
Right.
بس بس يعني لا America is a different it's a whole other
Yeah.
story. America is so every anywhere that there can be money to be made, there's space there is for a transaction, there will be one. A
Right.
sales tax and then a service fee and then tax on the service fee and then a car fee and what was $10 is suddenly $25 and you're like, wait, what? Oh, I,
Hmm.
I I just wanted a box of fries. Like that's I didn't want.
People joke now that they're like, it costs $100 if I leave my house. And
Mhm.
that is so incredibly true and sad at the same time. But I also part of that, like squashing down of our history and, events that happened. We also, I believe, were fed that we should be fearful of other countries. They are bad. This is what will happen if you go to a third world country. And now that, like, I feel like most of us really do kind of see what's going on, it's like, I feel like we're a third world country and people don't want to come here. Like, I things don't seem that bad in these other countries that I was brought up to be so scared of. And I feel like that's another way that they kind of keep us believing that everything here is wonderful. You should never want to leave. It will be way worse over there. And when in all reality, I don't think that that's the truth.
No, not at all. Like I've been here now for 2 weeks and it's genuinely just so healing, despite the fact that the economy is destroyed and despite everything, it just every time I come back here, because I go back and forth between Canada. We always have since I was a kid. And it has always felt like being inside the bubble, the walls of the bubble or the walls of the machine. And then coming back here is always coming back to earth, coming back to the jungle, touching grass again. Oh, this is what the world is like. Right, 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 right.
Right.
It's very interesting. The
That
way of life,
is.
the way you move just is different. The way you see
Mhm.
things is different. Yeah, we definitely live in a bubble. The new world is a bubble of its own, even more so than Europe. Europe doesn't have that same bubble-like separated aspect. It's closer to Earth.
Right. That's interesting. You're giving me a lot of good talking points to bring
Yay, I'm
up
so glad.
to my husband. I really do. I feel like I've learned so much just like sitting here talking with you about all this stuff because this is how he'll be like, okay, so let's start researching on what it will take. Cause then that's another thing that I don't know, but he'll be like, everyone here just assumes that it's impossible to get citizenship in another country. And that's another thing. I'm like, is it for real that hard? Or is
You
it
don't
just
even need it. You don't even need
that's
citizenship. If you have a US passport and you go to Dubai, you don't need citizenship. You need a working visa, but you'll get paid really well and you can live
interesting?
really well. Like it's so simple. It's not, they
Huh.
want Americans. Like my friends, what they do, because we have Lebanese passports and you don't get paid as well if you're Arab. So what people do is they emigrate to Canada, the US, Gaza. Canada and the US are the best for here. So they emigrate They wait it out. They do their PR, they get their green card, they get their passport, whatever, they get their credentials. Usually they'll go for school and then wait it out, get their passport, and then go back to Dubai or Saudi, Kuwait, Qatar to just work really good jobs, just get really, really paid really well. Like I'm talking like, I don't know, 250, 300 grand a year, no taxes, nothing. Like that's just all money in your pocket, really. Not to mention that you're close to the whole world. You're not
Yeah.
isolated on this faraway continent. You can be anywhere you want within a few hours. You can be in Europe, you can be in the Far East, you can be anywhere in Africa. Like, yeah,
Man.
mm, it's not as hard as they try to make it seem. But like you said, it's all set up in a way to really reinforce the solidity and preciousness of the bubble. Like, oh, everything outside is so bad. Like, I'm literally healing right now. What's bad is my time in Toronto. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's bad. My soul, like, literally cripples when I'm out in North America for too long. I just can't.
That's exactly how I feel.
You should
And
come
it's
visit
hard
me.
when, well, I mean, it, it's difficult when you think about, because we have a ranch where we're at. We have farm animals. We have camels and kangaroos and horses and donkeys
Mm.
and sloths and like we have so many animals because we have a farm essentially.
I love
And
that.
it's amazing, but when it's not like my sister lives in California. She's single. She lives in like a one bed or a two bedroom house. And she's talking about wanting to like go live in another country, that would be very easy for her to do because she already works remote. She would literally just be able to like go. I have a husband, two kids, farm animal. Like it would just the hugeness of, oh my gosh, moving my kids from their school and like
Yeah.
it would be a massive
Yeah.
culture shift, number one. And there's just a lot to think about. What would my husband do for work? Like, do you know what I mean? Those questions just start stacking. And then I'm like, this is really overwhelming. I desperately would love to do that because I feel like my soul would finally be able to like take a breath and be at, like you said, like heal. But it's the monstrosity of all the stuff that would go
Mhm.
into doing that. And I'm a person who would very much just like spontaneously do it. But we have collectively, like, we have a lot to think about and plan for. But I'm definitely not going to stop thinking about it. And you just made me feel a hell of a lot more hopeful than I was before we started this an hour ago, because now I'm like, maybe it really isn't that fucking hard. Maybe we can do this.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely not. I mean, I understand you have so many things going on, but even if you visited, even just getting out of the bubble for a minute and just seeing what the world is like outside, how people are living, like just hanging out, just getting a breath of new air from a new world or a different world. But even that, doing that for yourself and then going back will change, I think,
Right.
even the way that you're living your life there. It'll change the quality of your life there and your perspective of your life and the way, the government is moving and everything is changing. When you see, for example, how we live in Lebanon, like right now, this setup and my room light is the only electricity and light I have on in the house because my house is running on solar panels because there's no governmental public electricity in the country anymore, for example, or when COVID hit, all of a sudden, every single US dollar in the country disappeared and all of the banks went bankrupt overnight, and people literally lost their life savings. Literally, everyone in the country who had any life savings in a bank lost them overnight. Overnight. Hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, doesn't matter what you had, it's all gone. The currency is literally deflating, like it's 100,000 times what it was 2 years ago. All of these things are happening, and you could not stop people from a party. You could not stop a good day from happening. You would not find anybody crying at the beach. You would just see life. You would just see life everywhere in a way that you don't see it where we are, where we are so comfortable and think that we're so miserable. We don't see life the way people life out here, despite everything that would suggest, oh no, you should just dig a hole and die really at this point. Like, no. And I think just visiting and seeing that would give you so much, it would just broaden your perspective. I mean, travel in general obviously changes people's perspective and gives people perspective experiencing other cultures, but especially Americans, because we think that we have everything there. There's everything in the new world. We don't need to go see the world because the world comes to us. But no, it's not the same. The air is not the same. The water is not the same, you know?
The food is not the
Food.
same.
Oof.
The food is not the same.
Yeah. If you come to Lebanon, you come for the food, Aslan. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say that they went on a vacation to Europe or somewhere else other than America, and they ate everything. They didn't really like abstain from having bread or pasta or cheese or dairy or anything, alcohol, and drank, ate, walked, did whatever, and felt great. And then the second that they came back and started eating, their digestive system was like fucked and they had to go back on their heartburn medication or it. And it's just interesting when you see so many people saying things like that, when you're like, I mean, like, I know our food is crap here, but it's crazy to think what you said, getting out for just a minute and seeing how your body functions and how you feel and how dependent a lot of us are on medication here because of the food, the water, the environment, the air, everything is
Yeah.
it to me, it's very alarming. And I see it. I've seen it for a while.
It's a
But
matrix of its own. It's a matrix within a
right.
matrix.
Yeah, I agree. God, this was like so enlightening. It really was. I feel like I learned a lot and just I wasn't expecting like the conversation to kind of go where it went, but it was so interesting. And I love hearing everything that you had to say about like just the culture and how different it is in other places. And I don't know, I feel like I just got like a history lesson. That was awesome. And
Thank you.
so I before we kind of wrap up here, I want to, if anyone is interested in finding you to do a tarot reading or anything like that, I want you to kind of tell them like where's the best place to go to do that? Where do they go to follow you? Is it TikTok, Instagram, website?
Yeah, TikTok and Instagram are the platforms. YouTube, I upload like lives and stuff. Twitter/X. I don't know.
Okay.
What the appropriate thing to call it today is. um, and for readings or for learning tarot or for extra resources, book lists, stuff like that, that's all on my website. It's like a little link tree. So that's there. It's twitchy-witch.com. And I'm
And I'll
Twitchy
put all
Witch
of
on
those
all. Okay,
in the
awesome.
show notes. That way they can easily just click it and go. And I was actually reading some of the little like snippets of stuff that you've said that you made into books. Was it called Quickies?
Quickies, yeah.
I loved that. I was looking at that this morning and I was like, first of all, I love the name Quickies. That's amazing. And then I was just reading some of the stuff and I was like, this is so good. I need to get one of these books. That's a genius idea.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, I don't know, it was because I didn't think it was poetry, you know, uh, and I was like, okay, so it's like when you have a quickie, it's not sex, but it's a quickie. Like you get the orgasm out of it. And that's kind of what they are, you know. You don't get the whole poem, but you get like the juice of the message. So
Yeah.
it's a quickie in comparison
And
to a poem.
that's good for a lot of us now because like our attention spans are so depleted that it's like a lot
Yeah.
of people just want like, what is the message out of this poem or article or book? And that was a wonderful little thing that you did. So,
Thank you.
but I'll link your link tree and all of that. That way they can just go and follow, start watching you and hopefully book a tarot reading. And I know mine was awesome. I'm going to book another one for sure. And I need to go ahead and do that before you're booked up again. I know you're probably already booked out like a month again, but anyway, this was so much fun. And again, thank you for taking the time to be on and just continue being you and doing what you're doing and helping people. And I'll be contacting you again for probably a follow-up history lesson.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me and, for bringing me on to your show. It was awesome. I had a great time.
Thanks. I did too.
Thank you for checking out the CWC podcast. If you want to learn more about our community, make sure to check out the show notes.